Okay. Shavua Tov to everybody. I hope you all had a suitably enjoyable Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, albeit a rather different one than the one we used to. Ours was, I think, quite successful. We did what we had to do in the manner that we had to do it in. And those of you that were there, I hope you enjoyed it. And those of you that weren't there, I hope you'll be there next year. So we're going to carry on where we left off a few weeks ago in Sefer Shoftim. The beauty of having the shiurim recorded is that you can go back and see where you were up to. I couldn't remember where we were up to, so I went and had a listen to the last 15 minutes or so of the shiur from last time, which was really interesting because it was all the questions and discussion and stuff that we had last time. Hilary brought up some interesting points, as did Helen Rosen, who of course is not with us today because it's Simchat Torah in London. So let me just remind you all where we got to. We are in the last story of Sefer Shoftim. We are in the story of the Pilegesh Begiv'ah, the concubine of, I'm thinking of porcupines, concubine of Giva. This dreadful story of gang rape leading to murder. And as if that isn't bad enough, what we're going to read of today is the consequence of that terrible act, which is perhaps, if you can think of anything worse than that, perhaps civil war is it, because that's what it leads to. It leads to civil war. It leads to the killing of brother against brother. Perhaps the most horrendous thing that we can think of in our people. We have enough enemies of the outside. We don't need to have enemies from within inside. And when I was reading this story, I was reminded of the story which some of you, no, probably none of you will actually remember it happening, but all of you will be familiar with the story of the Altalina, which was a ship which was full of arms, came to the pre-state Palestine, and the arms were for the Irgun, which was led by Menachem Begin. And there was a standoff between the Haganah, which was under the control of David Ben-Gurion, and the Altalina, which was under the command of the Irgun, under the command of Menachem Begin. And there was orders were given to fire against this ship. Two groups of people fighting for the same cause, the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine, and yet the politics between them led to a terrible thing, which was the threat of violence of Jew against Jew. And the story, of course, ends with Menachem Begin giving up the arms rather than engaging in civil war against the Haganah. Menachem Begin, in his later years, achieved tremendous things in his life. He, of course, was the one who made peace with Egypt. He did tremendous things in his life, and when asked later in his life what was the thing that he was most proud of, it wasn't the fact that he had made peace with Egypt or that he'd become prime minister. It was the fact that he had not engaged in civil war, and that remained very, very precious to him. Howard, you were shaking your head there. Is there?
The worst part was not the threat of violence. The worst part was the killing of 3 Jewish soldiers, in quotes, on the Altalena.
Yes, yes.
by a force led by Rabin on the orbit of Ben Gurion, and a man in between called Epstein, but no relation.
Thankfully for that. Yes, so the story of the Altalena does not shed glory on some of our people, but Menachem Begin's response to this was not to be involved in civil war. He was horrified by the idea that there would be brother against brother. And this is what we're going to read of in the next chapter. Not only brother against brother, we're going to read some really weird numbers, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but nevertheless, even 1, 2, 3, or several thousand deaths, as we're going to read about now, of a Jew against Jew is a tragedy that we are going to read about. And as we mentioned last time, we have to ask ourselves the questions as to why these stories are placed here. And we mentioned in the past that these stories, the two stories that I'm talking about, are the Pesel Micha, which was basically a story of idol worship. We read about that in the previous chapters. And this story of the Pilegesh Begiva, the rape of the concubine and the subsequent civil war. Why are these two stories here at the end of Shoftim? We said in previous times that they didn't occur at the end of the period of Shoftim. They occurred much earlier in this this time period. Most commentators seem to think that they occurred at the beginning of the period of Shoftim, but the author of Shoftim, Shmuel, places them at the end of the book of Shoftim, after the story of Shimshon, to show us the, if you like, to showcase the depths to which the people of Israel had sunk in their moral behavior, in terms of how they treated this woman, in their religious behavior, in terms of how they reacted to the Pesel Micha, the idol worship of Micha, and the consequences of all that terrible behavior, which is what we end the whole of Sefer Shoftim with, which is the civil war we're going to read about. So the author gives us these stories at the end, even though they didn't happen at the end, to leave us, when we read the Sefer Shoftim, to leave us with the taste in our mouth of the entire period of Shoftim, which was one of almost continuous decline. Occasionally there was an odd blip of sunshine with Dvorah, for example, and Gidon to a lesser degree, but it was almost a continual decline from the beginning of the Sefer, which is, of course, starts with the death of, straight after the death of Yehoshua. We read yesterday in the end of the Zot HaBracha, we read of the death of Moshe, and in the Haftorah of yesterday, we read of the changing of the guard of the beginning of Sefer Yehoshua, which we've learned together. And since then, there was almost total decline in the level of the behavior, the morals, and the religious standing of the people of Israel. And it comes to its, I was going to say its peak, but really it's its trough in this story that we're going to carry on with today. So that's the background to where we're up to, just to remind you of where we are holding. This is the end of chapter 19, which we finished last time. The story, of course, was that this Levite was going on his way home. He stopped off at this place called Giva overnight. There was not much hospitality on offer, but he was eventually taken in by an old man. And we had the story, which was very reminiscent of Sodom and Gomorrah, of the people surrounding the house, wanting to rape not the concubine, but they wanted to rape the visitor and his male assistant. In order to assuage them, the concubine was thrust out into the crowd, and she was taken off and raped, and eventually managed to crawl her way back to where she was staying and died on the doorstep. And that's where we got to. Let's just read from verse 27 onwards to just remind ourselves of where we're up to. Leon, verse 27, please, of chapter 19.
Her master got up in the morning, opened the doors of the house, and left to go on his way. And behold, his concubine wife was fallen at the entrance of the house, with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let us go." But there was no answer. He took her upon the donkey, and then the man got up and went to his place. When he arrived in his house, he took a knife and took hold of his concubine. He sliced her body limb by limb into 12 pieces and sent her parts throughout all the borders of Israel. It happened that whoever saw it said, "Such a thing has never happened, nor been seen since the day the children of Israel went up from the land of Egypt to this day. You must contemplate this, take counsel, and speak up."
Okay, so this was a shocking thing. I mean, the shocking thing has happened. This gang rape has occurred, and this woman died. Of course, we've had a couple of episodes of gang rape in the recent times, haven't we, here in Israel, shockingly. So you could argue that we haven't actually learned any lessons. But let's have a look what he does. He cuts her up into 12 pieces. Obviously, 12 is an important number here, 12 pieces, and he sends the pieces throughout the land of Israel. And obviously, the 12 pieces are a reference to the 12 tribes. He sends them throughout the nation. If you remember this picture, Marcel sent us some pictures of the woman on the donkey, dead as they were going. I know there was another one with her at the entrance to the house. And the reason that those are so shocking is because we see them. And that's why this is so shocking here. I'll come to you in a sec, Marcel. That's why this is so shocking. I think I said this last time. I only know this because I just heard it when I listened to it this morning, but I don't remember saying it, but it's right what I said. What I said was this was a Facebook post from 3,000 years ago. When you, or your YouTube post really, you'll remember we've had in the recent past some shocking videos put out by the likes of ISIS of people being beheaded. Horrendous things. I personally never looked at them. I've never seen them. I don't want to see them. But people do look at them, and people see these horrendous things that are being done, and they have a very profound effect because we are by and large a very visual animal. We see things, and what we see has a very profound effect on us, a more profound effect on us than what we might just hear about. Which is, of course, why ISIS did it. That's why they put those horrible videos of hostages being beheaded, so that they have shocking value, because they shock people. And this is what the Levite did. He effectively put a YouTube video of his concubine having been killed and cut up into pieces. That's what he did. He sent it out to the whole of the people, and this had exactly the same effect that social media has today, which is to whip up a response to a shocking event, and that's exactly what happened here. He sent her cut her into 12 pieces and sent her throughout all the borders of Israel. And it came to pass, anyone that saw it So again, we've got that visual idea here. They would say, whoa, I've never seen anything like this. This is terrible. We've got to do something about this. And that is exactly the response that this fellow was looking for. That's why he sent the pieces round the country, so that he would absolutely get that response from the rest of the people who were outraged. Yes, Marcel.
I notice here, Vayikach et ha'machelet, the same word as in the Akedah, Abraham took machelet, and I don't know how many times it appears in the Tanakh, machelet, but it's not a very usual word.
That is a very interesting observation. I can't think of anywhere else other than in the Torah. I can't think of anywhere else other than at the Akedah. David, where are you? Are you here?
I'm here.
Can you think of any other place in the Torah where ma'achelet is used?
No.
Okay, Marcel, that's a very good observation. Let's have a look and think about what we can perhaps think about that.
I'm always fascinated by the word. Just to tell you that I once read that Dan Brown, the author, interpreted the ma'achelet to be made from a what do you call it? It comes from outer space, a stone,
an asteroid,
made from a meteorite.
A meteorite.
Yes. Now I never ever discovered where he got that piece of information from. It's strange that he actually said it. I was quite fascinated by the remark that he made.
Very interesting. The root of the word looks to me
to eat. It's an eating utensil.
Yeah.
Ochel, to eat.
Ochel, to be eating. So it's obviously an implement that was used in the preparation of food. So it'll be a kitchen knife, what we would call a kitchen knife, right? That's what it would appear that Avraham Avinu used, or was about to use, to slaughter Yitzchak. And here we have this same word again. I will have a look later on when we've finished. There's a you can do it online as well, but there's the book called the Concordancia, which is what people used to use before you had the internet, to go and look up where there were words in the whole of Tanakh. Be interesting to see whether the word ma'achelet is used anywhere else in Tanakh. I don't think it's used anywhere else in the Torah, but I certainly don't know enough Tanakh to be able to tell you it's not in Tanakh.
It's used in the Avodah. Kach machelet chada ushchato keseder.
Where's that from, Philip?
From the Avodah, on Yom Kippur, the Kohen thing. Yeah, Kach machelet chada ushchato keseder. Why do I know it? Because it was part of a very famous piece composed by Cantor Rosenblatt, by Chazan Rosenblatt.
That's interesting. Is that from the Torah, or is that from?
I believe that the phrase does come from somewhere in the Torah, but I don't know from where, because it is part of the avodah of the avodah.
If it's part of the avodah, it should be in Acharemot. I can see David Mark saying that. I don't think it's in the Torah. I'm sure you're right, Phil. If it's from somewhere, it will have been, but probably from maybe from a commentary or something. I don't think it's actually the Torah itself, but that's very interesting.
I don't know. Well. That I don't know, but I do know that it is a phrase which is used during the tefillah.
Excellent. That's really interesting. Really interesting. Okay.
Rob Steiner. Sorry, David, I'm interrupting you. Rob Stein Sangsal said, and he took a knife, then his words are used for slaughter.
Right. So there you go. So Rav Steinsaltz has also picked up on the idea that this is a slaughter knife, presumably because he also recognized the word from the Akedah. That's really interesting. I hadn't spotted that, so that's brilliant. I will look up and see if we can find Ma'achela anywhere else. But in the meantime, thank you for that, Marcel. It's really interesting. Yes, David.
Yeah, Philip is correct. It is in the Avoda, and the Avoda, of course, is based on the Gemara in Yoma, the description of the Avoda in the basement, but it isn't a direct quote from Acharei Mot. And the word only, I've got the concordance in front of me, the word only appears, apart from the Akeda, in one other place, which is in Mishlei. And it only appears once there.
What's the pasuk in Mishlei? Does it say?
And their jaw teeth as knives. So same thing, a knife.
Right, interesting, really interesting. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for bringing that up, Marcel. And thank you, David, for looking it up while we were there. Philip, that was really quite remarkable. Well done.
I am the son of a Bal Tvila. I know these things.
Yeah, well, you can't be wrong all the time, Philip. Right, let's move on.
Really... got the head, and which tribe got something else?
Okay, where are we now? So yes, this is what happened. He sent this visual shocking thing around, and it had the desired effect. Anyone who saw it said, "Oh, this is terrible." I don't know. Oh, wait, I can see a hand up there. I can see Larry and Sharon want to say something. Move
on. Just a question to address, asking you as we go through this. This man had the courage to take his personal tragedy and horror and alert the entire Jewish community and the Jewish world about it. And he had the creativity to do it in a way that would shock everybody down to their roots. Nobody would ever forget this. Is there anything in the story leading up to this, and his going down to reconcile with his father-in-law, or the fact that he stayed on so long? Is there anything that would paint the character of the man that took his job to be the alarm to the whole community?
Okay, that's an interesting thought. And I think the larger question, I suppose, which we can address, perhaps not now, but perhaps at a later date, is to look at the personality of this chap altogether, and see if we can piece together some kind of picture of his motives here. For example, were his motives revenge? Or were his motives purer than revenge, and saying, well, this is a terrible thing and we really need to bring it to everybody's attention so that we can stamp it out?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of whether or not we've been listening a lot to Rabbi Sachs, and I'm reading his book on morality now. And we've had a lot of conversations between Larry and me and Rabbi Sachs about leadership. And when Moshe slaughters the overseer, and he looks around and he sees nobody there, but he's in the middle of a building site. I mean, what gives people the courage to do something extraordinary?
Okay, so I think that's a very interesting thing. I'd like to put it on one side for the moment. I do want to come back to it, because I think it's a fascinating question to look at the motivation and the character of this guy, who, of course, we're not even told his name, which might also be relevant. But I don't want to do that right now, because I want to actually get into the story. But before we leave Sefer Shoftim, before we leave this story, we will come back to it. And maybe what we'll do is at the beginning of next week, which I'm playing for time, obviously, so that I can give it some thought myself. Beginning of next week, maybe we'll address that issue. So thank you for raising that. I think that's an interesting point.
Can you add to that point that they never really established in the end whether he had gone after her to chastise her for doing, whether he really believed in that she'd been with other people, or whether, like, the fact that he's got so angry now about what's happened, you were never 100% sure in the first place whether he was okay with her and he was going to forgive her for what she'd supposedly done, or whether she even did it. So that,
yeah. So this will all be part of our investigation of the Levi. We did touch on that particular point a few weeks back, because we weren't really sure, were we? Well, is she a wife? Is she a concubine? Did she stray? We remember we had that word that I think was vatiznach, and she strayed using the word zonah. Did she? Didn't she? Did he forgive her? Did he not believe her? All those things we had some doubts about, and I think this idea that Sharon has raised that perhaps we need to look more deeply into this man's character, I think will be a fascinating investigation. Let's do that next week, so that we can all think about it and do some research on it maybe. Right, let's go on to the next chapter and see what happens when the Bnei Israel receive these pieces of the body, are shocked by it, and at the end of this chapter we've just said, you've got to think about this and do something about it. I'm just going to mute you all again because some of you have somehow or other got unmuted. Leon, you just have to unmute yourself again, please. Right, here's chapter 20. Oh, I haven't shared my screen with you, have I? Let me share my screen. There it is. Okay, can you all see the screen? Yeah, okay, here's chapter 20. Right, chapter 20, there it is, Shoftim, Judges, chapter 20. Let's see what happened. Leon, from the top, please.
All the children of Israel went out, and the assembly gathered together as a single man, from Dan to Beersheba, and the land of Gilead, to Hashem at Mitzpah.
Okay, stop there for us there, Leon. Let's stop there. Okay, now, there's a couple of things I want to point out in this first pasuk. I'm going to read you the Hebrew here, where my pointer is. Vayetzeu kol bnei Yisrael, and all of bnei Israel went out. Where did they go out from? Why did it say they went out? Where were they? That they went out from. And what does that word yetzeu?
They all went out from where they were living. You know, he sent these 12 pieces throughout the land. So they all went out.
What does that word, what do those words add? Why could it not have just said, and all the congregation assembled? It's obvious that if they assembled, they went out from where they were living. That's obvious. Why are we told the word vayetzeu? What does the word vayetzeu remind you of? What's the root of the word? Anyone? Zeicher? Yes, Michael?
Yetziat
Mitzrayim. Yes, it's the same word as Yetziat Mitzrayim, the going out of Egypt. Vayetzeu kol bnei Yisrael. When was the last time that kol bnei Yisrael, all the bnei Yisrael, went out of anywhere and used that expression? Would be Yetziat Mitzrayim. I think the author is using that word vayetzeu to bring up the whole concept of a unified people as yetzeu, we went out from Mitzrayim. And you'll see in a second why I'm saying that. Vatikahel ha'edah. Vatikahel, and obviously you can see the word there in the root of the word vatikahel is kahal, or kahila, which means a congregation. Ha'edah is another word for congregation. There are, in those 6 words, in those 6 words, there are 4 out of those 6 words, 4 of them are giving us the impression of a unified response. Kol bnei Israel, vayetzeu, and that's taking us back to Yetziat Mitzrayim. Vatikahel, it's a congregation, and Edah, an assembly. All of those words indicate that this is a unified response. And then, just in case you haven't got the message out of those 6 words, the author uses this expression here, Ke'ish echad, like one man. Where have you heard that before? Where have you heard that expression, Ke'ish echad? Any offers?
At
Sinai.
Matan Torah at the Nasev Nishma.
Okay, at Matan Torah. Okay, right, you are correct. Now, I'm going to ask you a more difficult question. Where exactly will you find it in the story of Matan Torah? Where will you find that expression, Ke'ish echad? You're absolutely right, all of you. It is, we are described as Ke'ish echad in the at the time of Matan Torah. It's perhaps one of the.
When we camped. It's when we camped.
When they said Nasev Nishma. When they said Nasev Nishma.
All right, Faye is on the right track here. When we camped, can you tell us a little bit more, Faye?
So it was before receiving the Torah, we camped at the foot of the mountain, and
we did. And where do you find the expression Ke'ish echad?
It's actually Rashi. Ke'ish echad. It's not in the Torah.
Very good, Faye. Excellent, excellent. Right, watch the screen, please. There we go. Can you see the screen with a bit of a darker boxed text?
Actually, it's Ke'ish echad b'lev echad. I'm sorry.
There we go.
We were like one man with one heart.
This is Shemot, chapter 19, in the Sedra of Yitro. And this is the expression. Have a look at this. Verse 2 here. Can you see it on the screen, Leon?
Yeah.
Read me verse 2 over here.
They journeyed from Rephidim, and they arrived in the desert of Sinai, and they encamped in the desert, and Israel encamped there opposite the mountain.
Now, because of the way English is constructed, you don't get the obvious grammatical anomaly that you do in Hebrew with this pasuk. And I'm going to read you this pasuk in Hebrew. Vayisu meRephidim, and they journeyed, plural. They journeyed from Rephidim. Vayavo'u midbar Sinai, and they came, plural. They came to the desert of Sinai. Vayachanu bamidbar, and they encamped, plural, in the desert. Vayichan sham Yisrael neged hahar. And he camped there, Yisrael, singular, Vayichan, not Vayachanu. You can see the difference. Vayachanu is plural and Vayichan is singular. And Rashi, of course, picks up on that. And this is perhaps, I don't know, one of the, if not the most famous Rashi in the whole of the Torah. It's probably in the top 5. And here it is over here in the Hebrew. Vayichan sham Yisrael, Rashi says, Ke'ish echad belev echad, like one man with one heart. And here, the translation over here, and Israel encamped there, the singular form denoting that they camped there is as one man with one heart. But all the other encampments were divided with complaints and with strife. So Rashi is pointing out that they were totally united at the time of Matan Torah. So there's the expression Ke'ish echad, a very famous expression. Now, what I could say to you, if I could go back to Shoftim, I could say to you that the author of Shoftim was sending us to that Rashi. But of course, that would be nonsense, because Rashi lived 1,500 years or maybe a little bit longer after Sefer Shoftim was written. So Shmuel, although he was Shmuel Hanavi, could not have known that Rashi was going to use that expression. Clearly, Rashi used that expression because of the implication here that Ke'ish echad means unity. There's that expression, and I think it's really interesting that as soon as we see that expression, Ke'ish Echad, we automatically think of Rashi, and this is obviously a connection that Rashi has made here. So now we have got 8 words, and out of those 8 words, 6 of them are telling us how unified the people were in their response. And in case you still haven't got the message, the rest of the pasuk is telling you even more about the unity of the people and how outraged they were, so outraged that they managed to get unity. Remember, and we pointed this out last time, Hillary actually pointed this out last time, at the end of last time's shiur on this subject. There had not been outrage at Pesel Micha. There had not been outrage when any of those other wars that we read about in Sefer Shoftim, with Gidon as the leader, with Devorah as the leader, those had been tribal wars. Ehud was another one. These had all been tribal wars. There had been no unity. And in fact, Devorah, in her Shirah that we went through at the time, is very critical of Bnei Israel, that they didn't get involved in the battles that were raging, and she was very critical of the lack of unity. Here, the contrast is absolutely stark, that we are dealing with a very, very unified response. Now, where did the response come from? Lemidan ve'ad Be'er Sheva. Now, this is going to be a support before he gets it. I'm going to get my retaliation in first. This is a support for David Marks's view that Dan, the territory of Dan, was always meant to be in the north. Remember, we spoke in this whole story about Pesel Micha. The story, the sort of subplot of Pesel Micha was that the tribe of Dan, let's go back to our famous map, the tribe of Dan, which is over here, Gush Dan, which is the Tel Aviv area. Remember, Dan decided that they were going to go up to the north, to here. And we had a discussion about this, and David Marks was of the view, and he brought proofs from the Torah, that this was always meant to be, if you like, a sub-territory of Dan. Dan was meant to have this territory. And this verse here is clearly not talking about over here from Dan to Beersheba, because if you, Beersheba's down here, of course, because if you want to give the impression of unity of people, you're going to say, pardon me to the Americans, but I think most of us here are English. Pardon me to the Americans and the Ukrainians, but there's an expression in English, Land's End to John O'Groats. Yeah, you're all familiar with that expression. And Land's End's at one end of the United Kingdom, or of Great Britain, and John O'Groats is at the other end. So when you want to say all over the place, you use that expression, Land's End to John O'Groats. So here, our pasuk is saying the equivalent. Here, we're going from Dan to Beersheba. Now, Dan to Beersheba is, I think I've got a smaller map somewhere. There we go. Dan to Beersheba, top to bottom. Okay, top to bottom, the whole of the country. So the pasuk is telling us that the response from Bnei Israel was all of the children of Israel went out. The congregation was assembled. You don't get the feel for it in the English translation, but if you look at the Hebrew words, the author has pulled out every single possible metaphor. No, it's not a metaphor, is it? It's a simile of the idea that we've got a unified response from Dan to Beersheba, the Eretz HaGilad. And where is Eretz HaGilad? Let's go back over here. Oh, no, not that one. Where's Eretz HaGilad? Eretz HaGilad is on the other side. Here we go, the other side of the Jordan. There's Gilad. You can see Ramoth Gilead there. Gilad is in the portion of Manasseh on the other side of the Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan. Remember, 2 tribes, 2.5 tribes, Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh were given this land on this side of the Jordan, and this is Gilad. So not only is it top to bottom in Israel proper, but also the tribes on the other side of the Jordan were involved in this response to this terrible act. Now, why am I flogging this to death, this idea of this unity? The reason is that it's really quite remarkable. And we spoke about this briefly at the end of the last shiur. There was no unified response to the attacks from various different enemies, the Ammonites, the Moabites, whoever they happen to be, the Philistines. There was no unified response to that. And here, inverted commas, one lousy little concubine gets raped and killed, and the whole of Bnei Israel are up in arms about it. And I think that speaks quite well, really, for Bnei Israel, who are shocked to their roots, to use Sharon's expression, about the moral behavior of the people. So the author is clearly wanting us to note that there was a very, very serious response to this thing. Now, the last word on this first pasuk is mitzvah, and they went to Mitzvah. So what's so special about Mitzvah? Where is Mitzvah, and what was special about it? So Mitzvah is a place actually where many of us have been to. How do I know that? I know that because I was there with many of you when we went on one of our Tiolim. Please God, we should be able to go on our Tiolim again in the future, not too distant future, I hope. But one of our many Tiolim that we went to with David Altman, we went to a place called Nebi Samuel, which is said to be the burial place of Shmuel Hanavi. And according to Rav Steinsaltz, at least, Mitzvah is Nebi Samuel. So let's have a look and see where Nebi Samuel is. And if you can see the map, can you see the map?
It's right before you get to Yerushalayim on the road to Ramot.
It is indeed. That's exactly where it is. It is just north of Mevaseret Zion. Mevaseret Zion is as you come up the top of the hill to Yerushalayim. That's the Yishuv there. On the top of the hill, you can see the big canyon there, Har El Canyon in Mevaseret Zion. That was the place, one of the dubious honors of Mevaseret Zion is it hosted the very first kosher McDonald's restaurant in that canyon in Harel 20 odd years ago, maybe longer now. And Nebi Samuel, or Mitzvah, is, as you can see, just north of Jerusalem, over there. Now, if we translate that to, just keep that picture in your mind and translate that to our map, you will see there's Jerusalem, just north of it. Look where the territory of Binyamin is. Mitzpeh will have been over here, just south of Bethel. Between Jerusalem and Bethel would have been Mitzpeh, right on the border of the territory of Binyamin. So Mitzpeh was an important place in this story, because as you're going to see, probably not today, because we've, as usual, not got very far, but we're not in a rush, are we? So what we're going to see is that the attack on the tribe of Binyamin in this civil war is launched from Mitzpeh. And it's important to know where it was. It's just on the north border of the territory of Binyamin. And it's in the territory of Ephraim. Now, Ephraim, of course, was the leader, in later time, was the leader of the northern kingdom. Ephraim, when the kingdom split after the death of Shlomo HaMelech, and the two kingdoms split into the southern kingdom of Judah and the northern kingdom of Israel, Ephraim was the lead tribe. Ephraim was the leader. Ephraim represents Yosef. Judah obviously represents Yehuda. We see in the Torah many times, right back into Bereshit, which we're going to be reading over the next few weeks. We're going to read of the rivalry between Yosef and Yehuda. The rabbis are very sensitive to this, and they even speak about the rivalry in the future, in the days of Mashiach. There's going to be a Mashiach ben Yosef and a Mashiach ben David, who's from the tribe of Yehuda. And this battle between Yehuda and Yosef for the primacy of the leadership of Am Yisrael is something which is patterned all the way through Jewish history. And here it's no coincidence that the Mitzpeh is in the territory of Ephraim. Now, Mitzpeh is also, as well as being strategic in terms of position, it was a place where they gathered to discuss things. It was a place of importance. It was the Knesset, if you like. Over here, you've got Shiloh, which is not far away. We know what Shiloh was famous for. Shiloh was famous because the Mishkan was in Shiloh. Now, you'd have thought, and I would have thought, that Shiloh would have been the place where everything took place. We know, or at least we are given the impression, I'm not sure how true it really is, but we're given the impression that throughout the period of the temples, that the temple was the center of the people's lives. We would have thought that Shiloh would have been the main place to gather, because Shiloh is where the Mishkan, which is the forerunner of the temple, was situated. But actually, it seems that Mitzpeh is the place where decisions were made, where people gathered, etc. There are various examples of this. We'll find it when we get to chapter 7 of Shmuel Aleph in a few months. We'll see that Mitzpeh is a place where they gather. Also in the book of Malachim Bet, Mitzpeh is a place where decisions are made. So Mitzpeh is a known gathering place, if you like. It's a place where important national decisions appear to be made. So to go back to our verse, we have this first pasuk, which at first glance just sets the scene. But when you actually look at it word by word and analyze every single phrase and word of it, you can see what it's trying to tell us is that this was a national response to a shocking act, which was shockingly portrayed by the dissemination of the dismembered body of the Pilegesh. So let's have a look. Yes, Barbara and Paul have got a hand up somewhere. I can't see them, but I've got a hand up.
Did this unity apply to Binyamin as well?
Sorry, Paul, did this?
Unity that you've talked about several times.
No, of course not. This was against Binyamin.
So it's not unity then.
Well, no, it's ironic, isn't it? It's unity of everybody else in a civil war. So the Navi is telling us that everybody, this was not just a local thing against Binyamin. The whole of the people were outraged by Binyamin's behavior. And you'll see in a minute, it's not actually the whole of Binyamin. They're not really interested in fighting against Binyamin. It's Binyamin's response to their discussion about what on is what causes the problem. Let's carry on. Verse 2, Leon.
The chief, excuse me, the chiefs of all the people, of all the tribes of Israel, stood in the congregation of the people of God, 400,000 sword-wielding foot soldiers.
Okay, let's stop there. The first thing I want to do is to just disabuse you of the idea that there were 400,000 foot soldiers. Okay. Now, the reason I want to disabuse you of that is because it is my strongly held opinion, and you're allowed to disagree because there are some people that disagree. My strongly held opinion that the numbers that we're told about in the Tanakh are not to be taken literally. They are to be taken metaphorically as a lot. Okay, now why do I say that? You might have just got a little glance when I was looking for something else of this page over here. Where is it? Lost it now. Where's it gone? There we go. I asked Professor Google, how big was the Roman army at its peak? Okay, we're talking about the Roman army, the greatest empire ever, probably, in terms of how far it went and how many countries it subdued. The numbers grew to a peak of about 450,000. At its peak, the Roman army was 450,000. And so the chances of there being 400,000 foot soldiers in 11 of the 12 tribes, or 12 of the 13 tribes, if you like, of Bnei Israel at this time in history is, in my opinion, close to zero. So the expression 400,000 men is there to tell you it's a lot. So you don't need to get hung up on the number. Now, having put that to bed, there's another word I want to show you and to ask you if it reminds you of anything. This expression here, Vayityatzvu, Pinot Kol Ha'am, Kol Shiftei Yisrael, Bikal Am Ha'Elohim. Translated in here on the Chabad website, and there presented themselves, the chiefs of all the peoples of all the tribes of Israel in the assembly of the people of God, okay, which consisted of a lot of people. So this gives you the impression that all of the Bnei Israel, the chiefs, the whole lot of them, everybody's there in Mitzpah, a jolly lot, 400,000 soldiers plus all sorts of other folk. What does that remind you of? And the words themselves.
Is that something to do with Har Sinai?
Well,
the foot of the mountain.
Yeah,
when everybody gathered.
It does. But you're right that it's not the one I'm thinking of. And I'm thinking of this one. This is a clue for Jeffrey and Marcel. I'm thinking of, and the reason I'm thinking of it is because it's my Bar Mitzvah Sedra. And it's the opening words of my Bar Mitzvah Sedra. So if either of you two can remember what my Bar Mitzvah Sedra is, because you were both there, then you will know the answer to this question. And David Marks will help us out. Come on, David, what am I thinking of?
Vayakel.
No, I'm thinking of the beginning of the Sedra of Nitzavim.
Okay.
Was it Rosh Hashanah?
Okay.
Sorry,
I wasn't at your Bar Mitzvah.
No, you weren't at my Bar Mitzvah, so it was an unfair question.
No, but I agree with the first one anyway. Vayitzvu b'tachtit ha'har.
Yes, Vayitzvu b'tachtit ha'har. That's right. So the people were at the foot of the mountain, quite right, as Hilary said. I was thinking of Nitzavim, and I'll tell you why I was thinking of Nitzavim, because the Sedra begins Atem Nitzavim Hayom. You are all standing here today, Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, before Hashem your God, right? And then he goes on to say, Rashechem, Shiftechem, Kol Shiftei Yisrael. The whole of the people were there. Moshe Rabbeinu says, you're all here, everybody, from the water drawer to the wood chopper. And it uses that word Nitzavim Lifnei Hashem. And here, it's the same idea. So what Moshe Rabbeinu was doing there was he gathered them all together, and as Hilary said, the same expression at Har Sinai, and we've got the expression of Ki'ish Echad and Yitziat Mitzrayim. Again, the idea is that this is unity of purpose, except for Binyamin, of course. Right, so there they all are. So they're all gathered. They're all gathered on the border of Binyamin. Let's just go back to our map again. They're all bordered over here. They're all massed on the border. And then we go on to verse 3.
The children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up to Mitzpah. The children of Israel said, "Tell us, how did this outrage happen?" The Levite man, excuse me, the husband of the murdered woman, answered and said, "I arrived with my concubine at Gibeah of Benjamin to spend the night. The inhabitants of Gibeah rose up against me and surrounded the house against me at night. They proposed to kill me, and they tormented my concubine so that she died."
Let's stop there. Let's stop there. And there's a few things we need to look at here. So, Vayishma'u b'nei Binyamin, they heard that they had massed on the border at Mitzpah, but we don't actually see that they do anything. They've just heard that they're there. And here, the Bnei Yisrael, the spokesman, presumably the Bnei Yisrael, gives them an opportunity to, justify or explain what went on. And they say, "Tell us what happened. How could such a terrible thing happen?" And what's the response? The response does not come from Binyamin. The response comes from the Levi himself. And now perhaps we know why the Levi is described as a Levi. It's to distance himself from the tribe of Binyamin. The expression here, the Levite man, and what he says makes it very clear that he was a visitor. The Levite man, the husband of the murdered woman. Again, interesting that he's called the husband. This is another idea that we've got that we need to think about. Again, is she a pilegesh? Is she a concubine? Is she a woman? Earlier on, at the end of the last chapter, she's called both in one sentence. She's called a wife and a concubine in both in one sentence.
In this one also, the husband of the concubine.
Where are we?
It's in there. It's in that same sentence. She's called the concubine later on.
Yes, you did. That's right. He calls her the concubine.
I am the concubine.
The pasuk calls her his wife, and he calls her the concubine.
My concubine.
My concubine. That's right. He called them his concubine, but the pasuk itself calls her Ha'isha, the husband of the woman who was murdered. Doesn't refer her in the first part. It refers to as the Isha. And he came into Giva to lodge. And then verse 5, Vayakumu alai ba'alei hagiva. What does the word Baal mean?
Boss.
Owner.
Owner. That's right. The boss or the owner. In other words, Vayakumu alai ba'alei giva. Okay, he's not saying the ruffians, the scallywags rose up against me. He's saying Ba'alei Hagiva, the bosses. He's saying that the knackers there. This was the Ba'alei Hagiva are the leaders of the town. He is indicting. He's not just saying, you know what, there were a few ruffians in town that decided to do me harm. No. He's making it clear in his response that these were the important people in Giva. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Johnny, you'll be able to tell me because you've got the Steinsaltz there. I think that, yes, I'm right. Rav Steinsaltz mentions this in his commentary.
Have a certain degree of local authority.
Yeah, so Rav Steinsaltz says the citizens, Ba'alei Giva, some of whom apparently maintained a certain degree of local authority, which explains why they are characterized with the term Baal, owner. Okay, and then we've got something else which is a bit strange. It says Vayasubu Olai, and they surrounded the house, Laila, at night. Dimu laharog et pilagshi ve'inu v'tamot. Oti dimu laharog. Me, they intended to kill. Where was that? Did any of you remember that he?
No, they just wanted to. They wanted him out. They said send the guy out. They didn't say we want to kill him. They wanted to have fun with him.
Correct. They wanted.
But he's such. I have to just say this. I mean, I've read this. I find this one of the most. I find him to be one of the most despicable characters in Ov Tanakh. He's a kofer hakol. It's like he takes no responsibility. He instigates everybody. He takes his, he doesn't even look like, how is she? Does she have, can I do CPR on her? It's like throws her over the back and she's dead and cuts her up. And then he makes it like I was in danger. And it's not like I threw my, and instead they did it. It's like really he's denying any obligation in this whole thing. Okay, and that makes him so despicable in my book.
Okay, so I think that's.
And he also refers.
Hang on, Hillary. Hang on. I just want to just come back.
I agree with him. I agree 100%.
Okay. So,
thank you.
I also agree, and this
women in those days.
This is going to be this is going to form a part of our discussion next week on the point that Sharon raised early on, and that is
but why should you do that? These people didn't have any. Oh.
One second. Let me finish the sentence. We're going to discuss this next week. The character of this fellow, and what Faye has pointed out, I think, is very well supported by the way he's speaking now. And this is perhaps already leading us in one particular direction in our discussion of this man's character. But let's just put this man's character to the side for now, because I want to go into it in detail next week. And I just want, in the last couple of minutes, I just want to get a little bit further on and finish what he is saying up to the end of verse 7. So he says that they intended to kill me. And we don't find that. If you go back into chapter 19, you will not find that they had any intention to kill him. As Faye has said, they wanted to have fun with him, to know him, as the expression is. And he, if you like, I don't know if that's an exaggeration, but he certainly puts a different spin on it. And where do we see an exaggeration which causes a problem for the rest of the whole of the world and the whole of the rest of history? And I've not really expressed that question correctly, so I'm going to tell you, because I don't really know how to express the question. I'm talking about something that we will read this coming Shabbat, and that is the Parsha of Bereshit. The story
the denial of his. She did it. She made me eat it. He's saying, they wanted to kill me. It's like, and so they afflicted her. It's denial of your own responsibility. It's back to that point.
We see this denial of the responsibility. Adam says, it was Chava, she made me do it. But before that even, the serpent says to Chava, why don't you have this fruit? And she says, no, I'm not allowed to eat it, and I'm not even allowed to touch it, which is not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. And so there's a midrash that says that the serpent pushed her against the tree and she touched it, and she said, see, nothing happened to you when you touched it, and nothing will happen to you if you eat it either. And we know the consequences of that. So we can see the importance of here. He's, for obvious reasons, is trying to whip these people up, and he makes it worse than it really was. Bad enough, it was already bad enough, but he says they intended to kill me, which wasn't true. And then he says, verse 6, Leon.
I took hold of my concubine and cut her apart and sent her body throughout all the territory of the heritage of Israel. For they had done an indecent and disgusting thing in Israel. Here you all are, O children of Israel. Produce a decision and counsel right here.
Right, okay, so here he is, and he then describes what he did. He again takes no responsibility at all for the fact that he shoved her out the door in the first place, instead of going out himself and confronting the crowd. So he takes no responsibility for that. And then he says, so this is what happened. And I cut her up into pieces. Why? Key, Hebrew word key, because. Over here it's translated as for, which can mean because they did this terrible thing. It wasn't me. They made me do it. It was all their fault. So now, verse 7, now I've got you all here. Right, I've done my bit. I've got you all here. Let's see what you're all going to do about it. And we'll just finish with verse 8, Leon.
All the people arose as one man, saying, no man will go to his tent, and no man will turn away to his house.
There we have the expression Ke'ish Echad again. This is a unified response from the rest of Bnei Israel, saying, that's it, we are not going from here until we've sorted it out. So the Levite has achieved his aim, which is to whip up the people to get revenge, retribution, or correction, depending on which way you look at it, against this. And that's what we'll look at next week, how it goes along. Yes, Hillary?
Before you
say... Faye, hang on a second, Faye. Hillary first.
It's a shame, because what he's achieved is the unity that we should have had to defeat the Canaanites in the first place. We didn't have that unity that we needed then. So
now.
This is a tragedy that we have seen throughout history, that we are more inclined to gather together against our own people than we are to gather against our enemies. Not always the case, but often the case, sadly. So I think that's right. Yes, Faye.
So I wanted to make a point. They asked Binyamin, and this jerk answered for them. And Binyamin never had a chance to answer, to justify. They didn't hear both sides of the story. They just heard this guy who was an instigator.
You're right, but you could argue that they never had a chance to answer, or you could argue that they turned a deaf ear and did the old Israeli thing with the shoulder, you know, not interested, and didn't answer. And that's one of the criticisms that you'll see when we come to it next week. That is one of the criticisms against Binyamin, and it's one of the criticisms that Binyamin has against the other people, that you never came and discussed it with us. You never gave us a chance. So what you're raising is absolutely right, but like everything, there are two ways of looking at it, and it depends from which side you're looking at it as to, you know, which one takes your fancy. And we'll come to that next week. So it's a fascinating story, this, and I think what we've demonstrated, and I think it's something we demonstrate quite a lot in the way we approach our Tanakh in this forum, is that by taking an analytic approach to the Psukim and going slowly enough to think and stop and see what the words are hinting to us, we get a much deeper understanding of the story itself, as opposed to a superficial reading of it, which will certainly give you the flavor. But I think we are, by scratching the surface and digging a bit deeper, I think that we can achieve a lot more in terms of understanding the psychology of what's going on here. So we'll leave it here, because as usual, we've gone over, not too much over there this time.
Johnny, could I just say something about when he said that they wanted to kill me? He saw that they killed her, so he transposed it, because if he had been sent out, he would have been killed.
I think that's right. I think that's fair comment, but that's not quite what he says. I mean, it's obviously what he meant. What he says, Oti dimu leherog. They intended, i.e. they intended from the start to kill him. What we don't know, and I suppose we will never know, is whether their intention was to kill the concubine. I mean, they may just have wanted to rape her, and because there were so many of them, etc., she died from her ordeal. They may not have had an intention to kill her. We don't know. He has said that there was an intention to kill him, and I think that it fits in that he has embellished, or at least made the most of it. Let's put it that way, because
Johnny,
it suits his purpose.
Steinsaltz suggests that to kill him was actually a euphemism for rape him, and that was the proper way of describing man-on-man rape.
I'm not convinced that that's a euphemism. I don't often disagree with Rav Steinsaltz. I don't often disagree with Rav Steinsaltz, but I don't think that's a euphemism, because he doesn't use a euphemism later in the same pasuk. Inu is an expression which means rape. And why would he use a euphemism there? And the other thing is, the idea of a euphemism is to downplay things usually, yes. And his whole point here is to upplay things, not to downplay them. So on that particular point, I personally would.
He changes his mind, Rob Steinsaltz. In the next sentence, John, he says, alternatively, he meant that had he confronted them, they would have killed him.
Okay, so there you go. Rav Steinsaltz gives us both views. Yes, Howard.
The translation on the screen is sugar-coated as compared with my 1925 translation, which says, "And my concubine have they forced," which means raped, "that she is dead," which means as a result of which she died. So the gang rape led to her death.
Yes.
Quite clear.
Yeah.
Like in India, they do a lot of that in India.
Definitely. They didn't kill her. They gang raped it.
Okay. Right. Any comments on the Tanakh before we stop the recording? No.
Larry
okay.
had one question, which is, was cutting her up in pieces the only alternative, or what if if he had dressed in sackcloth and ashes and gone from tribe to tribe saying this is the way we're behaving? Was it an unnecessarily brutal?
Not effective.
He wasn't the kind of guy to go in sackcloth and mourn her. He didn't mourn her for a second.
It's not effective.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is that it wouldn't have been as effective, and we see the proof of that, I think, in today's YouTube videos that ISIS put out. It's very shocking. The visual sort of effect is much greater than somebody telling you a story about it. And I think it was deliberate that he did that in order to get the most outraged response that he could possibly get. I think it was a calculated decision on his part. I think it was a piece of public relations mastery, and I think it certainly did its effect. If you think about how the Arab Spring started, it started with that guy in the Turkish market, and again those shocking images of him on fire. That's what started the whole of the Arab Spring. The visual response, the visual pictures in somebody's mind definitely has a greater response, and I think it was a calculated decision on his part to do that, and it had the desired effect. That's my view.
But can I ask you a question?
No.
Was it commonplace for rape to be part of the tribe's behavior in all the other tribes, or was Ben Yeoman an anomaly of the people? They just weren't behaving like that.
I give up. You answer.
What?
I think that you have to say that this story, this rape thing, has to have been something unusual, because if it wasn't, then it wouldn't have got the response that it got. The rest of the people were outraged by this behavior. Now, I think it's a very fair question that you're asking, Nahum, because I'm surprised that the rest of the people were so outraged, because I had in my mind that this sort of bad behavior was commonplace. But I think you have to say that it wasn't that commonplace, because if it was so commonplace, why didn't the people just say, what are you getting your knickers in a twist for? This happens all over the place. Okay, so your concubine got raped. So what? Big deal. Well, they're saying, yes, it is a big deal. This is terrible. Nothing like this has happened in Bnei Israel since we left Egypt. I think those are the words that we had at the end of the last chapter. They were outraged. So I think you have to say that the story implies that this behavior was not commonplace.
So can we take off some of the criticism of everything? Maybe this whole story is to give an idea that this actual bad behavior.
We've lost you, Nahum.
You're
breaking up.
Normally,
we can't
I
hear
guess
you.
Hashem would have. Oh, okay.
Again, let's find out which piece of it. That's the whole idea here.
Johnny, the man that took the Levite into his house, when he saw him in the square, knew what was going to happen, because it happens all the time in Kippur.
Okay, so that's an interesting point that Johnny's just made. Let's just talk about that for a second. Johnny said that the guy, the old man that took them into the house, warned them and said, don't hang about here. You'll have to come in my house. Don't hang about here in the square, because, you know, this is a bad place. So he obviously knew that things were going to happen. But I think that demonstrates, I think Johnny's right, it demonstrates that this particular place, this behavior might have been commonplace, or at least not so unusual. But the fact that the rest of the country were in uproar about it must imply that it wasn't widespread across the country. So it could just be that, you know, this was the I don't know, the mosque side of the area, or Toxteth, or wherever it is that you want to denigrate as a bad place to be.
Johnny, one thing we do know is when Jewish Israeli boys return from Cyprus and Eilat with allegations of gang rape hanging over them, the nation is not, as of one, aghast at the alleged behavior.
Which says what about us today?
Well, there are those who defend them rather than keeping quiet until after the trial. Celebrate their return with champagne in the airport.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's perhaps something else. We can discuss. The response. Yeah. Yeah.
My opinion.
Okay, let's wrap it up. Shavua Tov, everybody. Just a reminder, Avril, if you can just turn off the recorder, because I can't find it on mine here. Just a reminder that if you want to join the medical ethics course, you need to register at the email address on the flyer that was sent out. Because places are limited, they are filling up fast. I think we've got about 40 or 50 registered already, I'm going to be sending out the Zoom links and the course material only to those who register. I'm going to set up a separate group for that. So if you want to join that, please register within the next couple of days before it's already too full. That's that. And another thing I want to tell you about, which I will send out a save the date in a minute, later on today, is that on Monday, the 19th of October, which is a week tomorrow, you are going to be treated to another dose of Philip's autobiography. He's going to read the final extracts from his book before he publishes it and tries to rip you off for however much he's going to try and flog you these books for. He's going to try and entice you with another wonderful extracts a week on Monday, a week tomorrow at 8 o'clock. And I'm going to send out a reminder for that, for those of you who want to listen to that. There's a Rosh Chodesh group for the ladies on Sunday, Elaine?
Yes,
a week
Sunday
today,
night.
Next Sunday night. Details will be sent out in due course again. So that's next Sunday, next Monday, and next Tuesday. We've spoken about, and during the rest of this week, we'll have our usual Shurim, the Rav on Wednesday evening, Gemara Shir on Wednesday morning. Have I missed anything? No. Okay. Right. Shavua Tov, everyone.